Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A friend of the Dar, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Tonight, Dar al-Athar is honored to present an archaeologist from Italy who has done extensive archaeological excavations on Failaka Island, here in Kuwait. The Italian institutes and universities have always been playing a crucial role in strengthening the collaboration with the Kuwait government in cultural and archaeological fields. This year, I would call it the golden anniversary of Kuwait-Italy friendship in archaeology, as we received here in Kuwait the first Italian mission in 1975 to carry archaeological survey and excavations on Failaka Island. That started in the following year of the 1976. Our two-night lecture by our friend and colleague, Dr. Andrea, is very important as it expresses not only the results of Andrea team's excavation, but also to extend the decades of a friendship and scientific collaboration, enhancing our understanding of Kuwait archaeology, in particular, Failaka Island, the gift of Kuwait, فيلكا هبة الكويت. The island of several civilizations, Failaka Island carries a complex history extended back 4,000 years, from the golden age of the first civilizations to the modern era. The secret to Failaka rich past is its location, just 60 miles south of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, empty into the Arabian Gulf. From the rise of Ur III dynasty in 2100 BC, the world's largest metropolis in the late 3rd millennium BC, until the Second Gulf War in 1990, the island has been a strategic prize. For thousands of years, Failaka was a key base from which to cultivate and protect or prey on the lucrative trade that passed up and down the Arabian Gulf. This evening, lecture titled The Al-Qurainiyah Site in the Archaeological Landscape of Failaka Island, New Perspectives for a History of the Island, aims to present the Kuwaiti-Italian archaeological project carried on in the site of Al-Qurainiyah on Failaka, where a late and early Islamic settlement were found. Building and workshop has been investigated, and a large amount of pottery has been collected during 10 years of work in the field. Ceramics from archaeological stratigraphy seem to indicate an occupation of an area as a harbor as early as the late Hellenistic period, with an intensive and well-organized occupation between the end of the 7th century and the beginning of the 9th century AD. After centuries of neglect, a new village emerged and developed above the ruins of the oldest site. The lecture aims to present the topography of the two sites and some preliminary results from the comprehensive analysis of all the finds excavated at the site of Al-Qurainiyah between 2010 and the latest 2024 campaign. Our two-night speaker, Dr. Andrea Di Miceli, earned master's degree in classical archaeology at the University of Perugia, master in classic degree at the University of Matera, and he received his PhD in late antique studies. He took part of numerous excavations with Italian and foreign universities in Italy and abroad. He has been collaborating for years with the chair of methodology of archaeological research and archaeology Roman of the university. Since 2010, he is the director of the Italian archaeological mission to Failaka here in Kuwait. Let us pushing the 50th anniversary and celebrating the friendship by welcoming Dr. Andrea to his lecture.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Azan Ashkanani, my friend. Thank you for your presentation. And I want to thank the Dar al-Athar to have me this night to speak about our work on Failaka Island and to show you the results of our missions. In 1825, British Navy Lieutenants Guy and Brooks were commissioned to make a map of the Gulf of Kuwait and its islands. The results of the map was the trigonometric plan of grain and the northern part of the Gulf, where together with the bathymetry of the Kuwaiti coastline, the island of Failaka was clearly visible. The soil and the type of vegetation are described in detail, but above all, the inhabited area of the island are shown. 1, 2, and 3 settlement called as town, but we don't have the name of these villages. From the map, of course, it's not possible to identify the name of the settlements, but some years later, in 1836, the same map was used by another English officer, Felix Jones, who gives us a more accurate description of Failaka, and from which we finally know the names of the towns. So, some passage from his diary. It has 3 towns on it: Zor, the western; Saida, the northern; and Grain, the eastern. So Grain is Al-Qurainiyah, of course. The former of which is the only one at present inhabited, the other 2 having been depopulated by the late plague. So we have two very important information from this diary. First, the names of the name of the towns and their locations. But above all, that at this time, at this date, the only city was permanently occupied was Zor. In the following years, things do not seem to change much. In 1845, another British officer, Campbell, delivers us a very similar picture of the island. Some stripe for the diary. The only village at present inhabited is Zor, situated on the western side of the island, containing from 100 to 150 families, mostly engaged in fishing and governed by one of the relatives of the Kuwaiti chief. At the beginning of the 20th century, even the town of Zor is described as a small village. On its western side, it is a small village with date groves and about 250 inhabitants. The island is unhealthy and the water indifferent. So, this is the general situation in Failaka in the 19th century. Then, what we really know about Qurainiyah? What information can we give thanks to the excavation we are carrying out in this fascinating and important settlement? Just some topographical information. From what everyone can see when visiting the island, Al-Qurainiyah is a deserted and late Islamic village located along the northern shoreline of the western area of Failaka Island in Kuwait. adjacent to a shallow gulf. It remains stretched along the coast for about 500 meters from east to west and extend inland for about 250 to the south. Here you have aerial photos from the 60s, where you can see the village that it's completely abandoned, the farm where 3 wells were detected, and on its east side, a fort, a little square fortress that belongs to this village. The settlement, here you have an aerial photos of the fenced area of the modern, of the modern archaeological site. So this is the area, the archaeological site. So outside we have other structures belongs to the same archaeological site. So now also this area is protected by a fence. The settlement, including several limestone and mud brick domestic building, covers an area of about 12 hectares. Features are present, preserved to different degree. Over the flat area of the south of the hill, the remains of building consists of foundation platforms, often covered by refuse heaps, with little evidence of stone-built walls. So in 2010, we made a large survey of the site, and from the surface, it was possible to see walls and mound of stones that belongs to collapse of houses. The best preserved buildings are on top of the hill and in the southern slope, where remains of walls are preserved up to 1 meter. This area has the highest concentration of building. In the north of settlement, here you have a geophysical map of the area made from the Kuwaiti Slovak mission in 2008. So we base our work on this first map. So as I told you, the higher part of the village, this part, is the one that preserved the most of the structures. And adjacent to the coast, all the structures are covered by a thick level of natural sand. Several spoil heaps, mainly consisting of stones, are scattered all over the surface. In some cases, the entire perimeter of the house was clearly visible from the surface, so it was possible to identify 2 kinds of structure. The first are more complex in shape, consist of a courtyard house with several structures all around the open space. The second is simpler and more modest. So at the end of the 2018, 3 courtyard houses were excavated in extension, and 1 house with a different shape was found and excavated on top of the hill. The first trench of the excavation was open in the west part of the village, in correspondence of a structure well noticeable from the surface. You can see here the entire building. The house has 2 open-air courtyards, 1 and 2. One bigger than occupy a large area in front of the rooms, and a second smaller here, probably in an inner courtyard located between all the rooms. Both the fences area were open along the south side. in relation with two big entrances. So the two courtyards are as two openings, one here and one there, to south. The main room of the house, identified towards the northeast of the building, this one, showed 5 levels of occupation of flooring from the ancient one to the last one. The first from the top, belonging to the last phases of occupation, was made with dry bricks and presented some traces of renovation. So some walls are built on top of the last pavement. So this house has a different phase of occupation and renovation. On the southwest part of the house, here, at the presence of 3 rooms placed side by side and characterized by presence of ovens and storage area, like this one, suggested to identify the main kitchen and warehouse of the house. Regarding to the second house we excavated in the second trench, the investigation revealed a more complex architectural sequence and a clear partition between a residential and a productive area. The building is a courtyard house facing to south. Facing to south. So north, south, this is the entire structure. Structured around a big open square space in which it was possible to enter through a large gate opened on a beaten earth route. So in front of the house there was there is like a square that divides this house from this other one, and there is like a little route that divides the two structures. The southeast part of the building. It was investigated only in its superficial level because it was made all in mud bricks. So in order to preserve the integrity of the walls, we just investigate the surface of the wall and then we cover again the structure. But as you can see, we can rebuild a long room, a rectangular room, with some piece of and fragments of arch that collapse inside the south room of the house. Together with the collapse, we have traces of plaster all along the walls, outside and inside, as you can see. Just the plaster were preserved, and we lost all the mud bricks that should represent the walls of the structure. This room has an entrance from the east. That led into a room in which collapse of piers and some architectural fragments were found. These last things allowed reconstructing part of the upper level of the inner facade of the wall, decorated with one arch for each side, placed between angular piers. So we have an arch from this side and one from that side. So this distribution of the collapse allowed us to rebuild the inner part of the building. The west side of the room, this part here, was completely excavated, and in some part we have brought to light the complete archaeological sequence. It consists of 3 long halls placed along the northwest side of the courtyard. The first one has walls built up with sandstones, and it's divided into 4 rooms, 2 larger than the other one. 1, 2, 3, and 4 rooms. The second one was completely built with mud bricks, of course, with arches facing to the courtyard. So the door of the room is here. The different orientation of the structure, not perfectly perpendicular one to the other one, you can see better from the plan. So you can see that the 2 structures are not connected, and there are a difference in the orientation. And the absence of a connection allowed it to be assumed that it was added later. So this room was added later to the house. The last side of the house the north one, was occupied by another long room excavated only in its north part and can be interpreted as a kitchen. It was full of, also in this case we have different ovens scattered on the surface. These 2 buildings were different from the other one found during the excavation because of the presence in both halls of areas dedicated to the dates processing and their storage. At least 3 madbassa, 2 in the west room and 1 in the south one, were found in connection with the oldest level of occupation. This is one of the madbassa, and this is the second one. The dates press were made of sandstones and mud bricks, bonded and plastered with lime mortar that form channels with round profile. You can see very well from this image. The reconstruction of the archaeological sequence revealed that at a certain point, almost 2 of the madbassa was completely removed and covered, converting the room into a domestic space or for other use. More precisely, in the south hall, here, the floor level was increased of 50 centimeters using fragments of mud bricks, while in the other one, the channels of madbassa were completely removed. In the same structure, in connection with the last pavement in this room, a large amount of oyster scattered on the floor, and 3 entire green glazed jars were recovered. The third trench was open on top of the hill of Al-Qurainiyah site to investigate some big heaps of stones that seems to be related to a collapse of a big structure. During the excavation, it was possible to bring to light a large building formed by at least 6 holes that seems to have been expanded during the time. Through that archaeological investigation, the presence of 3 phases of occupation was verified. This is the plan of the entire house. In the first phase, there were 3 different edifices, all used as habitation, as evidenced by the ovens placed into the floor of the structure. The second construction phase was characterized by an extension of the living space, so that the 3 rooms were connected by some walls, and that created a unique structure. The 3 main halls continued to be used, but not longer independently for each other. They were joined through the construction of a big fence. The last construction phase instead seems to invert this trend because the living space was greatly reduced. The halls 6 and 7 were no longer used, so the rooms here and there. As suggested of the collapse of the walls found under the level floors belonging to the third phase. So in this case, we have a big transformation in the planimetry and in the use of the house. So, about the chronology of the late Islamic village, during the excavation we collect a huge amount of potteries, but because in the late Islamic period the pottery, only some kind of potteries could help us to give chronology. One of the potteries, the Chinese porcelain and the European imitation of the porcelain. Thanks to of course, to the porcelain that we recovered during the excavation, we were able to give the chronology of the different level of occupation of the village. So the first level, the first period of occupation of Al-Qurainiyah belongs to the second half of 18th century, while the last one, the one represented by the two courtyard houses I showed you before, belongs to the beginning of the 20th century. So we have around 250 years of occupation for the late Islamic village of Al-Qurainiyah. So, but during our excavation, we were able to find a new settlement that was not known, and it was placed on the west side, outside of the fence, and occupied all the shoreline along the lagoon here. As proved by the ceramic collected on the surface, the two sides were not connected, of course, to each other. The smaller one, the one here, could probably be interpreted as the intensive occupation of the area dating back to the early Islamic period. The early Islamic settlement of Al-Qurainiyah extends for about 1 hectare and lay a short distance from the shoreline of a large shallow gulf. Trenches opened all over the archaeological area in the period between 2014 and 2020 led to identification of several buildings of different sizes and layouts, and allowed a preliminary plan of the village to be sketched. Here you have a sketch, a representation of all the structures we found during our excavation. The core of the settlement consists of a cluster of buildings. Here's some, okay, of building units, mostly houses, spread all over the flat area of the west of Al-Qurainiyah Tell. A building interpreted as a workshop featured two elongated kilns, 1 and 2, surrounded by circular ovens, and yielded evidence for a significant firing activity. The building was located on the western limit of the site, far from the inhabited area. So far, we have not been able to identify parallels for this structure, nor to reach a detailed understanding of its function and production. The high number of shards of torpedo jars gathered during the excavation of this area might suggest a possible interpretation. Most of them feature bitumes in their inner surface, not only as a thin film for impermeabilize the inner, but also with a thick layer inside. Because the bitumen was usually transported in solid form and melted at a later stage, the workshop of Al-Qurainiyah can probably be interpreted as a bitumen producing facility. The bitumes produced there might have been used to waterproof fishing boats or to coat roofs and terraces of the house. In fact, one house yielded fragments of bitumen that we should come from the roof of the structure. As regards the house, at least two building types have been recognized. The most represented one seems to be so-called elongated house, identified in almost 5 examples and excavated in 3 cases. This is the first one, this is the second one, and this is the third one, and the fourth one. These are only visible from the aerial photos. You can see here the traces on the surface of the walls of the house. So just we sketch the dimension and the shape of the house. The buildings are rectangular, and usually they present inner partition walls dividing the space into different rooms. The second building type has only been identified in one case as yet. The house is roughly square-shaped, and the internal partition is more complex than the elongated one. You can, okay, there is not very visible from the excavation, but you have to believe me, this is the shape of the house. In both cases, the sides of the building has the most surprising feature. As regards regarding the elongated one, the excavation and the traces on the ground suggest a length of about 20 meters and a width of about 4 or 5 meters. The square house, on the other hand, extends over an area of about 120 meters square. Even though the two buildings type differ in both size and shape, the construction technique used is the same. Here you have some example of the house during the excavation. 3 courses of differently sized flat stones without any concrete serve as foundation for the walls made of mud bricks. So in most of the cases we found just the trace of the wall, because during the late Islamic period, the inhabitants of the new village used to collect all the stones from that house that probably were still visible from the surface. So they recovered the stones to make it simple to build the new house. Some pebbles of pebble alignments along the walls connected the bottom of the walls with the pavement, and might be interpreted as the remains of stone plinths abutting the external walls, serving to protect the lower courses of bricks from water and moisture. Inner floor were all covered with beaten clay, sometimes laying on a thin layer of flat stone. Here and here you have example of the pavement we found during the excavation. Different flooring might suggest different functions. It could be argued that the rooms featuring by pebbles served as storage space for perishable goods contained in jar, which needed effective insulation from water and moisture. Substantial amounts of fragments of large storage jars, such as torpedo jar and other typology, gathered both inside and outside of the building, in some cases with clear evidence of repair, point toward the presence of a storehouse. Two of these jars were identified in their original positions, almost completely buried in pits dug into the floor of 2 different rooms. A high number of jar fragments were gathered below the collapsed layer and in a dumping area outside one of the houses. So we know that the most of the potteries we recovered during the excavation on this house was a big container. Other categories of artifacts related to everyday activities were identified in all the buildings. This is some stamps that belongs to the big container I showed you before. The most common objects were black burnished ware cooking pots imported from India and refined pottery such as glazed cup, like the one you can see here, imported from Iran and Iraq, and that suggests us the chronology of the villages, because this is the typical cup in shape and color that you could find in a settlement of the 8th century of the medieval 8th century. The pottery collected during the excavation allowed us to pinpoint the main phase of the village, to span of about 100 years only, between the 7th and the end of 8th century. Although archaeological investigations have clarified that most of the houses were abandoned at the end of the 8th century, scattered evidence suggests that the area was frequented again at the beginning of the 9th century. We found some shards of pottery belongs to the Samarra horizon on the collapse of the house. So it means that someone came back during the beginning of 9th century, but not to occupy again the house, but just to trade or just for a seasonal occupation of the area. Excavation data from the buildings suggest that some dwelling underwent multiply construction phase. This is the last 2 years trench. One of the houses in particular can undoubtedly be ascribed to the latest frequentation phase. Stratigraphic data, this is the drone we made on top of the aerial photos. Stratigraphic data line up with the evidence for the external annexes, like so the main building 1 and 2 were linked by some structures that belongs to a later phase of occupation. And also this room was clearly added to the main one, to this one. Different construction phases cannot securely be interpreted as a different frequentation phase. The 9th century artifacts were gathered from contaminated layers, and they allowed us to ascribe the latest phase of the settlement to this period. The evidence uncovered during our latest excavations seems to suggest that this part of the island was also used as a dock before the early Islamic period. The study of archaeological materials and the reconstruction of the topography of this phase are still in progress. Regarding Trench 12, this is the last trench where we are working on, the excavation of this area of the village has made it possible to identify a very complex archaeological palimpsest that has, however, returned a complete picture of the occupation of this part of the island. Investigations have revealed the presence of a pre-Islamic occupation dating back, according to the material, to the Hellenistic period and possibly to an earlier period. Huts, light structures, ovens, and a large quantity of fragments of large containers represent the main traces of a seasonal occupation that predates the foundation of the early Islamic village, while a large rectangular structure, this one, with plastered wall and lime and clay floors testifies to the early stable occupation of the area. These big rectangular structures, this is the, so we finished to excavate this structure this year, and all the materials that come from these structures belongs to the 3rd and 2nd century BC. So it is Hellenistic, of course. In conclusion, at the end of these 15 years of excavation, it seems possible to outline some historical and archaeological aspects related to the occupation of this part of the island, as well as one of the on the urbanism, and the architecture of the two villages. Three distinct phases of occupation characterize the area of Al-Qurainiyah: the late Islamic village, the early Islamic village, and the Hellenistic one. The significant archaeological evidence of the pre- and early Islamic occupation, represented by the structures identified along the shoreline, suggests the existence of a little settlement coeval, according to the materials, with Al-Qusur, and probably also with the Greek fortress. The long life of Al-Qurainiyah as a landing spot and its importance is demonstrated by the Hellenistic finds that point to the use of this site involved in unloading cargoes of transport amphora and other goods, including ceramics. The presence of cooking pots and hearths, along with fine wares, indicated that at least part of these objects was consumed and discarded on the site, as the traces of occupation dating back to this period seems to indicate. Early Islamic Qurainiyah seems to have flourished between the 7th and the 9th century. The huge amount of transport amphora found both in a stratigraphic layer and on the modern bay floor seems to confirm its role as a port. This village, as well as the contemporary settlement of Al-Qusur, is characterized by a long-lived, vivid trade network that connects all the shores of the Gulf, with prominent ties to Iraq and Susiana. A long period of time passes between the abandonment of this settlement, this early Islamic settlement, and the new occupation of the area in the late Islamic period. According to the archaeological evidences, the late Islamic site was began to occupied from at least the mid-18th century, and its life developed for the next 200 years, with more or less long periods of decline, as documented by the sources and excavations carried out. The silence, the wind, and the sea welcome us here in this village 15 years ago, when we first landed on this beautiful island. Now the earth and the stones speak to us and tell us a story that wants to and must be shared by all. Thank you.